The Guns on Pegs podcast is brought to you by iTap Group. Hello and welcome to the Guns on Pegs podcast. My name is George Brown. Chris is here. How are you doing, Chris?
Hello, George. I'm good. Good. How are you?
Yeah, not bad at all, thank you. Now, we're recording on the 31st of January, meaning there's one day of the season left. I think I'm right in saying you're not out tomorrow?
I actually got an invite yesterday.
You didn't?
But I can't go, which is annoying.
That's a shame. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'm gutted as well. It would have been a really lovely... do you know what? Well, my I've had some lovely days, and the most fun days are with really good mates that you might not see that often, but like when you get together, it's, as was from the time before, and shooting is what brings you back together. And this was one of those mates. And yeah, gutting, absolutely gutting.
But what about your season as a whole? A vintage year?
No, far from it. Do you know what? I think this is my quietest season since I was 17.
Wow. And just to be clear, how many days is that?
I actually don't know. Probably...
More than 5?
Yeah, more than 5, but...
More than
not
10?
Many. No, less than 10. But I think probably like 8 or 9.
Okay.
Yeah, which is, given this, quite quiet.
Yeah. Well, there has been one or two other things going on.
You've been shooting quite a bit this year, I'm feeling. I've noticed it.
My absence from the office.
Yeah.
Yes, I would say I've probably shot more this year than ever before. I actually haven't counted up the days either, but it's definitely more than 10. And I would say probably closer to 15.
It's a nice amount, that number, isn't it? Because it kind of feels like once a week almost.
Well, I was going to say I think it probably edged towards slightly too often at points within the season, which isn't to say that everybody should stop inviting me. But there were definitely moments when I had a weekend off and I was very grateful for it.
This is the problem with young children.
Yeah. But quite quickly, I then sort of started getting an itchy trigger finger again and was excited to get back out. I had, I didn't do a huge amount. Actually, that's completely untrue. I was going to say I didn't do a huge amount over the Christmas period, but actually I think I shot twice in the week before Christmas and Boxing Day, and then twice in the week after New Year. So scratch all of that. But yeah, I think I've had a really lovely season. I've been to some really nice places. We had a great season on the shoot at home. Barring one or two aberrations, I've shot reasonably well as well.
Do you think that has any impact on how you look back on a season?
Would I have enjoyed it less if I'd shot worse? Probably not.
I think it's about a couple of memories. I haven't thought about my own question before I asked it to you. But I'm remembering a particular day I went on. It was a day I felt like I shot really well. But it wasn't about that. It was about a particular bird, which I was able to go home thinking, that really made it.
It is always either about one particular bird or like a short sequence, like maybe one drive where you shot really well.
Yeah.
Or something like that where you think, oh, I actually seem to be kind of getting somewhere here. But yeah, I mean, it's been great. And I do think that, part of the reason I've shot reasonably well this year is just because I did a fair bit and just relaxed into it and had a really lovely time. And I've shot with so many old friends, made lots of new friends. I mean, it feels like a long time ago we shot at Iford.
I forgot we did. That was ages ago. Goodness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good year. Good year.
Yeah.
It's a shame it's over. I mean, it's one of these things you don't take advantage of it enough when you're in it, and it gets to like April, and you're like, "What was I thinking? Saying no to that Saturday or something."
Yeah. Well, I've got this, having said I shot quite well, I did not shoot very well. I was shooting on Tuesday, last day of the season, and I really didn't shoot very well. It's quite frustrating to have finished having shot badly, but I think in a couple of weeks' time I'll have forgotten about that. Anyway, enough about us, Chris. I think it's time you introduced our guest today.
Indeed. Our guest today is a very talented photographer. His work graces the pages, and indeed the front covers, actually, of publications like Shooting Times and The Field. He's also a contributor to Amateur Photographer magazine. And alongside former Guns on Pegs podcast guests Richard Negus and Rich Prideaux, both of them, he's 1/3 of the Countryslide podcast. Thoroughly recommend it. Go and check it out. So you're going to get a taster of the last third of that today. But unusually for our guest today, he doesn't actually shoot, but he might have been to more shoots than you have. So he is a passionate angler, enthusiastic consumer of game, and a big observer of the field sports world. So definite big reason to have him on today to discuss it from that position. Put down the flash gun and put your hands together for Callum McInerney-Riley.
Yay! Thank you. That was
the audience.
That was a very kind introduction.
Well, Callum, it's very good to have you with us. I have been an avid listener to the Countryslide podcast since its inception not that long ago. We'll talk about that a bit later on.
Cool.
But since Chris and I have just been reminiscing about our year, how has the season been for you from behind the lens?
Yeah, it's been good fun, really. I haven't done as many driven days as I did last year, but I've probably been out more times between deer stalking, wild fowling, pigeon roosting, and everything else in between. So yeah, I've been out a lot, but not all driven days. But I am actually out tomorrow as it goes. I got the last day of the season, Beaters Day, in Cambridge, which should prove to be really fun because the beaters there are hilarious. They're the best group of beaters you will ever meet. They're so good. So yeah, it's going to be an exciting day, really.
What's the format of tomorrow then, do you reckon? Is it one of these ones that ends up in the local? How's it going to go?
I'd hope it ends up in the local. I think I'd be quite disappointed if it doesn't. In fact, the last 2 times we've done that shoot, that's where it has ended up. But we're all quite tame. I've got to drive home, so, it's just it's a 1 beer affair, but, it's just nice to chew the fat.
Yeah. Beaters Day with a decent line, last day of the season. Driving home from one of those, that's a shame, isn't it?
Yeah, I think this lot have such good banter between them anyway. I think that's what you go there for,
Yeah.
They're a good bunch. They absolutely, a lot of driven days, very gentlemanly, very polite to each other. These lot are absolutely brutal. They will just be, you'll get in that thing and the expletives you hear being thrown around and the accusations, quite frankly, libelous, and a top tier banter from that beaters wagon, which will be the gun bus as of tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so on the subject of drinks, let's do What's That You're Drinking. Callum, you can go first. What's that you're drinking?
You asked me for a drink that reminds me of shooting. And so the drink that reminds me of shooting personally is just lots of straight black coffee. Because I'm always up at silly o'clock to get sunrise on a marsh in North Norfolk or something like that. So that's pretty much my drink of choice. But I've not got it with me because I had to sneak past my child and get straight upstairs to record this podcast. But I do have a nice glass of red waiting for me downstairs. It's always a red wine, really.
How often are you silly o'clock? That must be, if you're out for first light to North Norfolk, remind me, where's home for you again?
I live in Essex. So
you're looking at, what, a couple of hours north?
Yeah, I call it airport early. Nobody should get up at 1 o'clock unless they're going on holiday. That's basically the rules, but that is my job sometimes.
Do you mean to say that sitting in the marsh in North Norfolk isn't holiday?
Sometimes it can be, Get a bit of sunshine on your face.
I'd call it holiday with a gun, but it depends how much you love photographing it.
Yeah, it's normally quite fun. In fact, so I was out with Simon Garnham, who's a contributor for Shooting Times, and he remarked that on the marsh, he said, I've been out a few times this season just on my own, and he's like, it's quite nice just having someone there as company to talk with.
That's nice
when you're on the marsh. And I was like, yeah, I think I agree. I think having a bit of company it's a nice thing to do, Just sit there, surrounded by nature, sun's coming up,
Bit of a chatter.
possibly a few shots, abusing each other.
It's super relaxing, that, isn't it?
Oh, it's amazing.
Could have done with that this week. It's been full on, and I love that moment where you obviously cannot get your phone out. You can't do anything like that because if you take your eye off it, you'll miss the opportunity that you would have had. And just watching the world around you, just seeing nature do its stuff, it's just one of the best moments.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, the other thing I think is, being in an environment like that, it feels like you're sort of not really on the same planet. It's such an alien place to be that it's quite easy to switch off from, the cares of everyday life, isn't it?
Some of the marshes we get to, it literally looks like you're on another planet. It looks like the surface of the moon or something. You're in these great big craters, or you're like in a ditch hiding behind a bit of netting or something, and you're in such a strange environment. It's really good. I actually quite like wildfowling. Wildfowling people are a strange subset of people that quite like just going out, and there's a weird thing where they like it colder, more ferocious, more likely to kill them. I'm not sure what that is. That's some kind of self-loathing, perhaps. Like, they just want it to be freezing cold. They can't feel their toes, lose a bit of circulation, maybe frostbite, but then they're like, oh yeah, I shot a widgeon as it went down the creek. Cool. They love it.
And
I love it
what
too.
you mean. Well, I was going to say, I think we're all in that category, but when you talk about it like that in third person, it's easy to laugh at it.
Yeah. But if you boil anything down, like football is just a bunch of geezers kicking a sack of air between two posts. When you boil it down, it's like nothing's that important, is it? So it's
and none of it makes an enormous amount of sense. I think that's the mad thing, I've often
boys
said,
and their toys.
as a means of protein acquisition, pretty much all forms of shooting are completely insane, and particularly driven shooting, we make it as hard as humanly possible. We get excited about the ones that were further away, and if we were really interested in having pheasant, we'd just use an air rifle while they're on the ground. Chris, what have you got?
I think on the last pod I had a glass of wine from the lovely Tim, my wine man in Kent.
You did.
I think I had that glass of white. Tim, the wine man in Kent, who, by the way, I'm never mentioning the name of his company. Sorry, Tim. Just I do not want anyone else knowing about him. It's because I happened to mention it when I was out the other day, and someone was like, "Oh, I've heard about this guy. You really need to go down there." And so, yeah, that's the last of it. We're not doing it anymore. I've got a glass of the Anar Chic, George. You like it? I bought a load when we were up at Branches Park.
Oh yeah, that is lovely stuff.
Glass of red. So yeah, I think my wife and I will have the rest of the bottle this evening, and I should have a glass now. So yeah, it's a good value red from Tim, the wine man in Kent.
Excellent stuff.
How about you?
Well, I woke up this morning with a bit of a sore throat, so I had got a drink planned, but I wasn't feeling really brave enough. So instead, I've made myself a hot toddy, which was excellent. But unfortunately, I made it sufficiently long ago. It's now gone a bit cold, so I've now got. It's just a toddy,
tepid toddy.
Yeah, and it's not as delicious as it once was, but it is making my throat feel better.
What happens if you microwave it?
Well, I don't know, but it is in.
I think the alcohol will disappear.
Well, it depends. You only want it warm. I'm good at microwaving to certain temperatures. The amount of times I've had to do this with baby's milk, getting it bang on where you need it.
But it is in. I don't know if you can see that on the video. When we went to shoot over in Kent just before Christmas, we were very kindly given a couple of tumblers. So it's in my "What's that you're drinking" tumbler.
Hey, you need to take a photo and put it on social media. Whack it on the stories.
I might do it when it's not. I mean, the hot toddy is not terribly photogenic. It looks like I've sort of diluted some mud. So I might do it when I've got I've got a little bit of whiskey left. So I might have a proper whiskey afterwards and do that.
I had a whiskey in my "What's that you're drinking" glass the other night.
Did you?
Yeah, very enjoyable. That Japanese whiskey.
Oh yeah, it's good stuff. That I can't remember the name.
No, nor can I. But I got given it, and I actually forgotten who gave it to me. I feel awful. One of our lovely listeners when we went to Clay's Bar and we had our live episode at Clay's Bar. I still haven't finished the bottle, but it's now going quite fast because I've realised how good it is.
I went to an awards once and I was with a chap that decided to order so the credit card for the awards was behind the bar, and I think it was actually on Nikon camera's budget.
Wow.
And he ordered one of these Japanese whiskies, and when the bill came up, it was about 80 quid for this single shot of Japanese whiskey, which he hadn't realised it was quite so expensive. So he quickly drunk it and slipped away and was like, oh my God, I thought I was just ordering something nice, not insane.
Pretty cheeky at the bar then. If there's someone else's car behind the bar and they're allowing it.
Have you seen the? I was doing the rounds on social media a week or so ago of the bar bill for like a Stalker's end of season drinks or Christmas drinks or something. It's from the 30th of December 2024. I've got it here at the Fife Arms in Braemar. Total due 15,000.
What?
Oh no, hang on, wait. £158,914.
Wow.
What?
10 1940s Lefroigs at £4,000 each. I mean, it's the most unbelievable bar bill you've ever
ordering
seen.
This?
15 Glenlivets from 1943 at £850 each.
Sorry, when you say this is the Stalker's bar bill, I've got in my mind,
Well,
I built this up in my mind of like a ghillie with a couple of his mates. Like, I don't know many ghillies knocking around doing 150 grand bar bill.
Well, I have a suspicion maybe that aspect of it isn't accurate and that it seems more likely to have been the clients, doesn't it?
10 bottles, though. That's a lot of clients.
No, not bottles. I think these are shots.
What?
Oh, so it's an insane high end.
Yeah.
The Fife
So
Arms
a
in Braemar.
A £4,000 shot.
So, yeah, there's one here, one Lagavulin 31-year-old cask of distinction, 25 millilitres, £560.
What sort of pub has this stuff available by the shot?
One that's anticipating a payday like this, I think.
But this. They knew they were coming, didn't they?
They must have shipped. Maybe they shipped their own.
That's unbelievable.
Pretty good. Anyway, so if anybody would like to send me a bottle of the 1940s Lefroy, I'm more than happy to have a go on it.
We once had I was working with Canon cameras in a hotel bar in London, and the way that works is you have to get the room to do a press event. You have to have a spend behind the bar. Yeah. They don't charge you for that. You just have to have a spend. And it was the hottest day of the year. So they released this camera, hottest day of the year, of like 50 journalists, only like 25 turned up because nobody was going to brave the tube because it was just boiling hot. Everybody that did order just ordered water because everyone was incredibly dehydrated. And we got to the end of this event with like £8,000 to spend, and there was no way you couldn't put bottles of behind the bar. You couldn't take any off site. You couldn't put it towards a hotel spend. So there's like maybe 10 of us sitting around this table saying, okay, we have £8,000 to spend and like 8 hours. How many friends can you get to this place like as quickly as possible?
Hold on, can't you do what these guys did? Just between two of you, just.
Well, so we had vintage Dom Perignon, we had Cristal, we had all this champagne, but even at like the extorted, obscure London prices of like £300, £400, £500 a bottle, still doesn't touch the sides of £8,000. And one point, the guy was frantically asking us how many chips with steak nachos we wanted. And I was thinking, you're not going to make a big dent in £8,000, no matter how much fillet steak you eat. I could out with the biggest pot belly full of steak and champagne, and we still won't have put a dent in that, really. But yeah, what a position to be in.
Yeah, that's amazing fun. But on their part, that's quite stupid, isn't it? Because they should have made you an offer and got you out of there without having to give away any of this product. Because that product doesn't cost them nothing. Like if they'd said, look, we'll call it quits at £5,000, they would have been up.
Yeah, I know, smart business sense, but yeah, they wanted their dollar. If you don't spend it, yeah, it's gone. It's out.
Yeah,
it's funny.
That's amazing. God, those situations don't happen enough anymore.
Gone are those days. And they used to do press trips that were absolutely ludicrous for journalists. Safari tours in Africa and stuff.
Because they wanted to show off their latest lens or whatever.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Different times now. Different times.
Right. So, Callum, the next segment is one that we call Whose Bird Is It Anyway? We turn to our email inbox and we ask our listeners to send in their shooting quandaries and queries and dilemmas, and we do our level best to help them out. So this episode's Whose Bird Is It Anyway comes from somebody we shall call JP to keep them anonymous. And JP has written, Dear George and Chris, I know you've already discussed keepers' tips on the podcast, but I still thought I would send this in. And he starts off with a question about the right amount to tip keepers, but we have covered that before. and it's a very personal thing. And anyway, we won't go into all of that again. If you want to listen to something along that, you can go and find the relevant episode. But he also sent in a second quandary about tipping the keeper or keeper's tips, and he writes, clarification, is it actually a keeper's tip? I always believed that the tip was given to the head keeper to retain in full or to be shared with any underkeepers for their work. However, it now transpires that this is not always the case. There are shoots I've been on where the keeper's tips are shared with or kept completely by the shoot owner. In my view, the keeper's tip should just be for the keeper or underkeeper, and it being retained by the shoot owner is simply wrong. If the tip is retained by the shoot owner, and the keeper is just collecting it on their behalf, it would be far more transparent if the shoot owner just added a little extra to the day. What are your thoughts,
Callum?
I feel like I'm commenting on, is this like communism, socialism? This seems like a very political issue. How have we got here? I don't know. Is it not value-based pricing? The man that put the birds over you is the keeper, right? He's the one that's done the business. So he should have it. But then, obviously, the person financially responsible is the person that runs the shoot, that's paid all the money out. So
you don't tip.
You tip a keeper.
We need
right?
to go back. What is a tip?
A tip's
that's deeply philosophical. Well,
Have
it turns
some
out
warm
this this hot toddy is quite good.
The colder it gets, the more dangerous.
Should we share tips with everybody? That's like, don't you just hate it when you give a tip to a restaurant and then they say, oh no, we share it out with absolutely everyone. If you're tipping, you're usually tipping for good service from the waiter.
Yeah.
But there is a point that the person that made the food good was the chef out the back.
Yeah, I've never been quite sure about this because it is it goes on, if it goes on the bill, for example, it goes on as a service charge. And, the chef could be a miserable bugger. It
probably is. You met chefs, they probably are.
So I don't really know. I'm not sure about it. Maybe the bar staff, they giving good service as well. Maybe more than one member of the waiting staff has been looking after you. I kind of get that. But I think I would be pretty upset if I thought that the owner of the restaurant was pocketing the money. Yeah,
so I'll give you that. The owner of the restaurant, in this case the shoot owner, should be pricing that on the price of his shoot.
100%.
That's where he gets his money from.
100%.
So the keeper should keep the tip. And if he wants to give it to the underkeepers as well, under his discretion. That's my party line on it.
Chris?
I mean, like if you're in a hotel and the chap takes your bags to the room, carries your bags up, and then you tip the chap carrying the bags, that's not going anywhere else other than to the chap carrying the bags, right?
Precisely.
You obviously stay in a much better class of hotel than I do.
No, I've just watched Notting Hill.
Don't get that in a travel lodge.
I think the tipping culture in the UK is not quite what it is in the US, is it? I mean, absolutely. I think in my mind, the tip is for like the person. Yeah, there's this sort of thing where it's not like the best paid job in the world, therefore a tip at some point factors in, right? And therefore it's just sort of thank you very much. It's very odd, isn't it?
I don't think we're angry enough about this. I think this is outrageous.
Sorry, 100%. I was just answering the original question. This is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And if I went on this shoot, I'd feel very, very funny, and I would never go back.
Yeah. If
that's my opinion on this.
If the big man's getting all the money, it's no good.
George, any advances on that?
Well, I think that the really interesting bit here is why you would be doing it. Either it's greed or it's an attempt to be able to post a lower per bird price.
Whatever it is, you've misjudged it. If that's your thinking behind doing this, whatever your thinking is, it's wrong.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Like, whichever way you try and dice this up. Hey, I heard another one the other day. I'm wondering whether this has come from the same scenario. I heard from someone that a shoot was, I think the owner was taking the tips, but worse still, he was taking the tips in advance of the day, after coffee in the morning.
Was that not, did we not cover that on an episode?
I've never
I've heard the same thing.
I heard it, and I literally was, I genuinely had to. Sorry, what did you just say?
Yeah, that's mad.
What's wrong with these people?
Social awareness is what's wrong.
Yeah.
That and the suggested tip. I mean, I know we've done that before as well, but you know, the suggest. I suggest you tip the keeper, whatever. I mean, and it's different from when, you know, if you're shooting somewhere and you say to your host, "What are we? You know, what are you thinking?" Or you say to one of your fellow guns, "What are you thinking?"
Yeah, I saw that the other day. Actually, that was quite funny. That was
But yeah,
there's this. You know, what's the social norm? So they're all panicking, going, is it? I'm not sure. What is it? And then they're all shouting at each other, working out what's socially acceptable and trying to scramble for £20 notes. It's quite funny.
Yeah, but you're right. The host or the sort of shoot manager or owner walking around suggesting the tip to the keeper, making it essentially like unacceptable to deviate from that before you feel like you're going to rot in hell. The worst thing is when it's like, let's say you're on like a sort of 50 bird day. And they come around going, right, everyone, yeah, I think it's been an absolutely lovely day. I'm sort of thinking 80 quid for the keeper today each. And you're like, sorry, what? But because it's been done in that way, you're like,
I'm never going to financially recover from this.
I think the only thing you can do in that situation is to one up them. Go 80?
Is that it?
160?
Or just say, what, between us? And then you'll be fine.
There are some odd people out there.
Also, is the handshake compulsory? Is that the secret handshake? Is that?
Do you know what? I'm really glad you've brought that up, because the other day I said to a keeper, I was like, this is ridiculous. Can I shake your hand properly and say, really well done today? I've absolutely loved it. I think you did a mega job. The conditions were really tough, and the way that, anyway, and there's some money for it. Thank you very much. Brilliant.
I thought you were going to say you tucked it in his waistband.
Made it rain on him. Made him catch each £5 note.
I found that you want to shake his hand properly and say thank you, well done, rather than the sort of half weird handshake with this
with a fistful of money. What is that?
With inflation these days, it's just a lot of paper inside this handshake, and I just feel that. Yeah,
surely you use pink notes, Chris.
I haven't thought about minimising the amount of paper by going to the right cash point. No, I get what I'm giving George.
Strong gust of wind, and it could all crashing down.
Well, I don't know. I might have told. There's definitely a story about this, about the chap whose tip is all in fivers, and in the process of doing the funny handshake, he loses control of one and it blows away. And having chased it around the car park or wherever it is they are, he hands it to the keeper, who hands it back and says, "It feels like you need it more than I do."
Beautiful.
Yeah, actually, that one the other day when I did that, it was quite a big tip. It was a really lovely day, and it was tenors, and it was, it's a whole palm of, it's weird.
Good. Right. Well, I think we've strong opinions on that. And speaking of which, it's time for an unpopular opinion.
This episode's unpopular opinion comes from someone that George has called Donatella, who writes, here's an unpopular opinion for you. Wearing a shuffle or similar fleece gilet over your waterproof jacket is pointless and impractical. Waterproof jackets are designed to keep you dry and protect you from the elements. By layering a shuffle-style fleece over the top, you're essentially rendering your waterproof redundant. The fleece gets wet, becomes heavy and soggy, and completely loses its insulating properties. So what's the point? It's certainly not for warmth or practicality. Unlike wearing a shooting jacket or vest over a waterproof, which has its advantages, e.g. additional pockets, shooting mobility, etc., the shuffle-on waterproof combination serves no functional purpose. The pockets on the fleece don't offer anything the waterproof can't already provide. Worse still, the fleece doesn't benefit from the waterproof layer underneath. It just soaks through and leaves you uncomfortable. This bizarre trend seems to have emerged from a misplaced sense of fashion than functionality, particularly among those sporting the less expensive equivalent. It's an attempt to mimic a style that works with traditional shooting setups, but without the practical understanding of why layers are designed the way they are. If you want to stay warm and dry, look the part, leave the fleece underneath the waterproof where it belongs, or wear a proper shooting vest on top. Otherwise, you're just wearing wet sponge armour for no good reason. Unpopular? Maybe, but it needed to be said. And I'm going to follow up with here. I've been waiting for someone to message this in.
Not wrong.
Brilliant. Right, now we can get to work.
Miss the the element that is all of that is just social signaling. It's like buying when a normal car will do you, but you buy something that's $100,000 and has heated everything. Like it's just social signaling so you can fit in and be one of the gang, be one of the tribe.
Can we just discuss for a start who started this trend? I think I know who it is.
Oh, go on, name names.
It's not really names. I think there's a young sporting agent vibe going on here, and a certain look. They all literally look like they've come out the same 3D printer.
I mean,
you could be describing our office there, Chris.
No. The point being that we've got a lot of independent thinkers in our office. They don't do this. Do you know what I mean, though? I think that's where this has come from.
What, specifically the waterproof jacket with shuffle over the top?
Yeah, it's classic. That's where
every time I see a shuffle, I just think it's a social signaling thing, or that person's a land agent, one or the other. I'm not sure.
Okay, well, the land agent bit links to what I was getting at.
Oh, well, that's it then. It's a land agent thing. Probably is.
I mean, I have my own unpopular opinion here, which is that I like neither a shooting vest nor a fleece gilet. I think if you were to just wear, for example, a nice woolly jumper, you would be every bit as warm and not look, ironically, quite so much like a sheep.
So I've on our podcast shoot days, I find visible shuffle gilets because for this is where this came from. This has been a bugbear of mine for a long time, and fair enough. In like sort of like beginning of October, where it can't decide whether it's warm or what, and it's dry. I can understand why sometimes they might feature, but it just feels like a shuffle gilet is a mega bit of kit, right? So many people have them. I love them.
Yeah, I will say they are good.
Just not in this scenario, please. Like, let's just keep the practical clothing for the scenario. Like, stop, just, as this guy's so neatly put. What are you doing?
Do you have a shooting vest, Chris?
You mean like a
tweed
thing.
Waistcoat situation with big pockets?
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah. I don't get to wear it much. The weather's never really it's never really in that. It's either too hot or just stick a coat on.
When I'm photographing shoot days, I'm always like laying on the ground, like literally laying front and knees and everything. So normally always have to wear waterproof stuff. And the only thing that shooting clothing is always quite restrictive. I mean, you're okay to plant your feet in ways, but it's always, you can't get up and down easily in it. So I just wear mountaineering kit. And it's funny because I've got like Arc'teryx jackets and lots of Patagonia stuff, which I'm sure the Patagonia, if this...
Oh, you're doing well then.
If the
Bit of Patagucci for lying in the mud.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I look like I'm in finance too, which is good. And it's funny because when I'm wearing that sort of stuff, I do often get people saying, "Oh, you must be freezing." I'm like, no, I've got like the appropriate layer systems. Just because I'm not wearing a shuffle doesn't mean I'm cold. Just so you know that. I'm actually quite warm under this. These are warm clothes. They're just not green and tweed. That's all.
Does the whole, as an outsider, does the tweed, green, the traditions of shooting clothing, does that make sense to you, or is it just does it seem super weird?
You know what I think? As an outsider, I think it very much alienates outsiders because it makes the shooting fraternity look like, I don't dress like them, I don't belong. So if you want to get more people in, you'd sort of cut back on that. But then the opposite side response of that is like, there's some thing about respecting your quarry and you all wear ties and stuff like that. Not sure that
that's the justification for continuing the tradition.
Yeah, but I mean, it's nice. It's nice to get dressed up, right? If you go out for dinner somewhere nice, you don't stick on old trainers and a hoodie and shoot out. It's nice to get dressed up. I get it, but it's quite alienating to an outsider because you don't feel like you belong when everybody's in. And the barrier to entry to buy all this stuff is insanely expensive, is it not? I mean, like, to get a shuffle, it's like a couple £100, isn't it?
Yeah, they've gone up a lot. Do you think the outsiders are looking at us even more weird if you're wearing a shuffle gilet over a waterproof? They're probably like, not only is this a lot of money, what are you doing? Like, that's just the wrong way around.
Yeah.
The, outs- the outsiders are going to get even more confused.
Yeah, I mean, that not just prove that it's all complete hogwash social signalling nonsense if you're wearing a shuffle outside of a waterproof jacket.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
And Chris, do you remember when Giles Catchpole came on and he said the point about the uniform is to signal that you know what you're doing and to make everybody else who you're shooting with think, okay, this guy's probably safe and is going to shoot reasonably effectively.
Let me tell you, it does not make you safe.
If I see somebody wearing a gilet over the top of their coat, it has the exact opposite effect to that, which is this guy doesn't even know how to get dressed, let alone shoot safely. I imagine he had somebody else tie his shoelaces for him.
I can't. I just love to know where this came from, and I think I'm onto something with this suggestion. And I think where that would have gone is through social media posts of these people who really, really are like in the know. They go everywhere, do all this sort of stuff, and then other people going, "Oh yeah, if they know what they're doing,
do you think it's because they've got branded gilets and therefore they want the branding on the outside?"
Yet they needed to wear their coat to actually stop themselves getting wet. So they were using the gilet almost as like the sort of, I don't care, but it has to be on.
Yeah.
Maybe if it started by accident and then someone thought, oh, this looks good. If they do it, they must know. And it turns out the whole thing was wrong.
Right. I mean, I don't think we need to talk about this very much more.
No, but can we just
need a
please...
vote.
No, we don't need a vote. But please, if you're listening to this and you're thinking about dressing like this, can we please start a trend that we stop dressing like this?
Or shame them on Twitter using the hashtag
Stop.
No. Just stop spoil.
Yeah, very good.
You know, like they do. There's a hashtag of like people that wear like a full football kit to watch a game. I can't say the hashtag without swearing, but there is one of those. So maybe we could just get that hashtag going down in the show notes.
I'm up for it.
Love it. Right. So next up, we're going to revive the Forgotten Drives segment, which we haven't had one for a while, but this one is really nice. Submitted by Edward, who has written, "Dear Chris, George, and the Collective. I've been very lucky to visit a number of shoots over the years, and even before the pod brought drive names to the fore, I always enjoyed hearing the names of drives and the associated stories of their naming whenever I visited somewhere new, and there have been some belters. I shan't deprive others of the chance of writing in, so I won't name them. That said, there are few drives in all my years of shooting that resonate so fondly as Spendlove's Bank on a small farm shoot in Derbyshire. It's not blessed with a hilarious name, but it is steeped in wonderful memories, and even though I no longer shoot on the syndicate, nor is the drive still called by the same name, brackets shoot politics, change of hands, etc., etc., the bank in question is still there and the memories remain undimmed. As a drive, it was always the first one of the day, and what a way to start. Fast partridges lifted first, sweeping down and along the bank like little Exocet missiles, hugging the contours before breaking over the guns, followed by towering pheasants striving ever higher to make the point, a wood just over the bomb field, brackets unexploded ordnance, discovered whilst ploughing, a story for another day.
Nice.
It's the drive where, as a 10-year-old boy, before I fulfilled my dream of standing with the guns, let alone shooting, I'd try to keep up with the rest of the beaters in the line as we trudged up a hill, which at that age felt like I was climbing Everest, especially when it had been freshly ploughed with wellies gathering mud with every red-faced step. It's the drive where we once shot it at the end of the day for a change, and unfortunately the sun had moved round to a poor position for the guns to see little other than blue-green dots in their eyes, which was a great shooting excuse, but also led to my dad's worst ever averages of 88 shots to 10 birds, giving us years of fun ribbing him about it. We still do. It's the drive where my brother, aged 13, shot his first game bird under the watchful eye of our father. It's where my sister shot her first partridge under the eye of my brother, now grown and more seasoned. It's where we saw a small covey of 5 grey partridge come over the line and 2 pairs, and a single fell to 5 superb first barrel kills. It's a drive where in the off-season I would sit among the bales at the top of the bank and watch the hares playing on the stubble in the sunrise whilst waiting for an early morning fox. There are so many more moments from over the years that are connected to that drive, each one making me smile that little more broadly as the next bubbles to the surface of my recollection. I only write in as I watch my brother stand with my wife for her first ever shots at game last weekend on a different shoot, a different drive, a different country in fact. And as I looked on, almost transported back in time to that familiar scene, it saddened me that we were not stood on Spendlove's bank, though I'm sure this memory will still join the vault with the same fondness. I'm not actually sure this qualifies as a forgotten drive, as it's my most remembered and dearest yet. I hope you'll read it all the same.
Lovely. These resonate so much, don't they?
They do. Very, very nicely written, that, I have to say.
I know exactly what he's talking about. These drives appear, and they sort of, after a period of time, become the place where all these things start to happen, and they become the sort of focal point of memories of that particular shoot.
Yeah.
It's really nice. Shame they changed the name. I'd find it odd that if you took over a shoot, you'd change names. I feel.
Well, I was shooting on Tuesday. They've changed the name. A new chap's taken over this shoot, and they changed one drive name because the original name was something like Andover Storage, because it was near a barn that was used by a storage company, and they've changed it to Roman Road because it's next to a Roman Road, and I feel like that is a legitimate change.
The first one wasn't an attempt to make a decent drive name. Well, as long as they haven't gone for like 2 slabs or something vulgar like that people now do. Having said that, his dad's worst ever averages of 88 shots to 10 birds. I mean, it sounds like a fruitful drive on its day.
It does. Callum, you visit so many different shoots and you must photograph hundreds of different drives. Are there any that particularly stick in the memory for you?
I photograph all different types, from like really small bird days to like some quite large bird days, to be fair. I think what sticks in my mind to me is like times that I have captured what I always say, it's better to be lucky than good. And to get those shots that are, how do you explain it? Like, I get lucky shots as much as the guns do, because, I mean, if there's a lineup of like 8 guns, quite often someone will say, you know, peg 1 and 2, that's where they're going to be, come down the hedge line, and then the birds don't play ball, and then they go over the complete opposite side of the guns, and I get no photos at all. Like, that's quite a possibility to happen, especially on a a low bird day. So on one shoot in Rabness, which I will talk about later, I think there was less than 10 birds shot that day. I mean, it might have even been less than 5 birds shot that day. And this guy hadn't really been shooting for ages. And this bird just comes along. I sort of look up, it's there. I take a picture as it comes over, and it goes down. And I'm like, that was like the second drive of the day. And I thought I could probably just go home now. It's like, that was it. And then there's one on the beaters day I'm doing tomorrow. There's one there, a chap called Cam's Powder, who's he loads black powder quite a lot. He shot a left and right as they come over, and I got this great shot of him. He was just in the perfect place, perfect spot. It's always good to get that. You got the tree line sort of framing the image all the way down, 2 birds in the air, both falling. Perfect. And that was the first drive of the day as well. Once you've done that, it's like, the pressure's off. I've got the story now. It's done.
Yeah,
well
amazing.
Described. Yeah. I can see that being a lot of fun. As you say, it's how do you put yourself? There's a lot of skill to putting yourself in the right position to get what you're after. And as you like you said, with framing the shot and using the topography to then hoping that it works out as you had in your mind.
And
cool.
I'm guessing the cloud of smoke from the black powder just adds drama to that picture as well, doesn't it?
If you get a flintlock day, especially, there's a lot more powder and banging and whatnot. Especially if you're on a winter's day, it's like 4:00 or near on, and it's getting dark. You get some real dramatic smoke and banging and all that. That's pretty good. I did one last week actually, Black Powder Day, and it was good. But there was no flintlocks that time because it was one of those storms where the wind was sort of 70 mile an hour, and if you use a flintlock, the gunpowder attracts water and doesn't do anything. So you won't actually get a shot off if you're using a flintlock. So they have to use the percussion cap jobbies.
Yeah.
While we're on the subject, if anyone's listening wondering about this, I highly encourage them to look up doing black powder days. You can get it sorted, so you can get teams of people to bring along kit, and I mean, I think even Nick Holt of Holt's Auctioneers runs black powder days.
I've done one for Nick before. It's really fun.
Didn't you do a muzzle loader day, Chris?
Yeah, I did a day with, well, we got Nick's connections and team to come along to a day where we did with a group of friends, and you end up with a smaller bag because obviously you takes you about a minute to load 2 barrels, and so it's arguably an more affordable way of doing shooting. And the beating team were super slow through the drives. Like, we did 4 drives and it took all day, and they were super slow. And when there had been a covey come through, they just stopped because it takes you so long for everyone to reload. But my point being that, honestly, this is, if you're wondering for a bit of a change next season, please give this a try or find a way of doing it. It's so much fun.
One of the things the new guns say about that is they say that in those situations, they've never really got to see other people shooting during a drive. They said it's actually brilliant to be knowing that you can't take the next shot. You're not looking for birds, and just take a breath in the heat of the moment, look to your left or right and see one of your friends taking a shot and lining something up. He said it's not something you normally do. You're normally focused on reloading, getting straight back in on it, and having just that couple of minutes to reflect while your loader sorts out the gun is
it's lovely.
Is a really nice thing. That's what they all remark on.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And we turned it. I mean, naturally, you kind of go, "Oh, how quickly can we load the gun?" Just because everything seems like a competition. And so we were sharing okay, you do powder, I'll do shot, you do wad, and then it would get to the point where it's like, "Did you do powder? Oh, I'm not sure if I did that barrel. We'll put it in to be safe," and then like you've doubled up on powder. And next shot, boom! Oh, yeah, I did that one. Whoops.
That sounds fun.
Yeah,
I want to photograph that.
Chris gets shorter.
It's
still got your eyebrows though, so that wasn't that bad.
Double powder, double shot. Good fun. Great. Honestly, I cannot say it enough. I think that as shooting develops over the coming years, I think people are going to get more and more into this. I think we will go back to basics because you can get away with a lot less birds and have twice the fun.
For sure.
Last week there was a guy who shot a pheasant that was so high they thought it was a partridge from 2 guns over, and a guy that's been a loader for many, many years. He said, in all my time, I've never seen somebody shoot a bird so high. He reckoned it was like 60 yards. And he said, I've never seen a bird shot so high with a black powder gun.
I mean, that's a lot of lead.
Yeah.
You're aiming at a different county. The time it takes for these things, it's like a whoosh rather than
I was going to say they go woof, don't they?
Yeah. It's a lovely sound, actually.
It's not like it's amazing, and it smells incredible.
Good. Well, Edward, thank you very much for sending that in. It was a lovely story, and it sounds like an amazing drive. So, Donatella, Edward, JP, and now you, Callum, are the newest members of the Most Noble Order of the Garters, and will soon be in receipt of a set of the much coveted Guns on Pegs podcast shooting sock garters. If you have got a shooting confession, quandary, or query that you'd like us and our guests to help you with, or if you'd like to share an unpopular opinion or a forgotten drive, or you have a podcast selection to share and you'd like a set of garters, drop us an email to pod@gunsonpegs.com. Callum, I wanted to ask you, how did you end up taking pictures of shooting?
That is actually a good question, because I get that quite a lot. It was really random. During lockdown 1, I had a baby and I'd spent all of my time. I'd gone from doing a lot of shoots in London, knocking around, being a trendy London photographer that drinks flat whites and goes from PR thing to PR thing, to basically speaking with my wife exclusively and making baby bottles and then washing bottles and then making baby bottles and then washing bottles, and then pretty much having no contact with the outside world other than that for a long time. And then an email drops in my inbox saying, because obviously all the London stuff was like I actually did a job just before we went into full lockdown on an airport train, and I went into Liverpool Street and there was nobody there. It was like a ghost town. It was the strangest experience ever. I was working for the train company, Abellio Greater Anglia. So I was on that train and I was up there and it was just dead. So all of that stopped, and suddenly I got a message from the picture editor of the Shooting Times, basically saying, I know you do a lot of fishing photos. Would you like to go and shoot rabbits? And I was like, not really, but I haven't been out the house for quite a while. And I think for my mental sanity, I probably, why not? Let's do it. So I went to Simon Garnham. He lives in Rabness. He said, right, how you doing? We're going to shoot some rabbits today. And I just considered, like in my head when you get the shooting stuff, like a lot of, how do you explain it? A lot of shooting stuff that I've been exposed to is like people, air rifles and stuff like that. Yeah. So I didn't know what I was going into, and took me down to this little area, and I saw that the rabbits were destroying the crops. There's a great big wheat crop, and it had eaten a massive amount out of that. There was loads of rabbits, and they just needed controlling. And I was like, actually, I mean, even a vegan couldn't dispute that this is something that's happening. This is like a rabbit is dying to protect your crops. Unless you want to pay for the rabbits to share your crops and pay 28 quid for a loaf of bread, and inflation, that's like 75 quid now. Like that's it. I mean, it needs to be done. And I thought, well, this isn't killing of rabbits. This is actual crop protection. I was like, okay, the morality, I'm on side with this. It's all good. It's all right. I haven't sold my soul to the devil. So that was my first one, and that looked really cool. We took some photos, and then I never stopped getting the call ever since, because my pictures were quite nice.
Good work.
From there, the picture editors, I mean, I live in a nice part of the country where there's a lot of shooting and a lot of good writers, which makes everything good in terms of content. So I've got a cover from sort of North Norfolk, all the way down to Kent, and a bit over the other side of the M25. Anything 3 hours from my house is fair game, really, which covers a lot of area.
It does. And what about your first, as it were, game gig? How was that for you? Having made your peace with pest control, was it easier to get your head around the sort of shooting for fun aspect of it?
Do you know, I couldn't tell you what my first driven day was. That's quite bizarre, actually. I'm not sure where my first driven day was, you know.
I mean, it must have been a while later because of lockdowns, for one.
Yes, it probably wouldn't have been a few years. I mean, I roughly knew what would happen and how that would go down, but I guess I'd been so used to it. I'd done a lot of wildfowling, rabbits and all that jazz, so I got fairly used to it. I do remember the first time I went deer stalking, I was a bit of a lump in my throat, seeing a muntjac for the first time get slotted. That was quite a bizarre feeling. I had to come to terms with it. But then once you realise that the damage that they do and you understand the whole thing around it, then it suddenly is like, I get it. I know.
And you now eat, I think, I gathered from listening to the Countryslide podcast, you now eat quite a lot of game one way and another.
I absolutely love cooking. So yeah, game gets... I've been exploring with game. It's quite good because over the last sort of 5-6 years, I've just been, well, how long has it been now? It's been about 5 years since the first lockdown, I guess.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've just been exploring with different things with game.
Did you get into it quite quickly? Like when that muntjac got shot, did you get into trying the muntjac soon after, or was it quite a while after?
So the first piece of game that I got given was a Canada goose. So if anyone doesn't know, that is pretty much the worst thing you could possibly be given. And it was breasted while it was still warm. So I had to brine it in beer and try and make it taste nice. And I think I succeeded. I actually invited a guest over. I've also been like slowly introducing strangers semi-willingly to eat game meat. So like I invited one of my friends over. I'd be like, come on, we've got a goose. If I'm going to try it, you're going to try it. And actually, I got some apples from the orchard, and I poached apples to go with the goose. I brined it in Westmuller brown beer, and I made a root vegetable mash, which is all very seasonal at the start of the season. And it did taste delicious, actually.
I haven't tried beer brining anything. That's next on my list.
Brining's great.
Beer brine as well.
Westmuller. I mean, it does feel a little bit of a shame to waste it, but it's one of the best Belgian brown beers, and you can buy it in Tesco's, so that's a bonus.
Very good. So, Countryslide then, how many episodes have you done now?
I think we're on like 10, so it's still pretty.
So you're doing one a week, right?
Yeah, we're doing one a week. We will stick to that schedule and try and cover a range of topics, although because I go shooting, we tend to talk a lot about shooting, stray into various other issues, but what we want to be is not a shooting podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do yourself a disservice there. I mean, you don't talk exclusively about shooting by any stretch of the imagination. It's much more, I guess, like rural affairs would probably be a better way of putting it. Incidentally, if anyone's listening and they haven't heard an episode yet, I highly recommend it. It is an excellent podcast.
I mean, listen to all 10, maybe 11. Now, the best thing about the podcast, really, what makes us good is we're all from completely different walks of life. Like, I live in an urban situation and I observe the countryside from the outside as a stranger, but I'm willing to learn. And I think there is a massive disconnect between rural life and like town life. There's such a disconnect. And there's also a big disconnect with most people and the food chain that is game meat, local produce. I mean, even when I'm trying to get people to eat more game meat, they're like, what does it taste like? Why do I have to eat this? Is this Bambi? All of those. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir. You know what the response is if you try and get regular people to eat game meat. Usually they're all very squeamish. I don't like it. Maybe I won't like it. Like, does it taste like this? I've had it before somewhere and it was horrible. So I've got a very different opinion of it. You've got Richard Prideaux, who is a forager. He comes from the complete opposite side of the countryside. So he lives in Wales. So that's very different from where we are. And Richard Negus is a rambling hedge layer from Suffolk who knows quite a lot about politics and gets a little bit angry sometimes. But we really like him. And he does a lot for birds and stuff.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing, is that you do manage to bring in, conservation, farming, food systems, as well as the sort of game shooting side of it. And I think it provides a really interesting perspective. And I used to joke that on this podcast, when I'd grown up shooting, but had never really done any sort of large scale, as it were, shooting. I used to joke that my role on this podcast was the benign idiot. It was my job to ask the obvious question. And I think that you fulfill a fairly similar role on yours, right? Yeah,
you're not wrong. I'm the curious observer because I'm not, I mean, I know some stuff. I'm not stupid, but I'm not I'm the curious observer that wants to ask questions because I don't understand it. And what I hope is that regular people, that's not to say that you're not regular people. That's not a terrible loaded insult. I mean, like, your average Joe on the street can hopefully come along on the journey and understand the countryside more and be better connected to their food, understand what happens in farms and the issues that rural communities also face without it being incredibly complicated. So I get to ask the stupid questions. I play the idiot.
Is that the aim of the pod then? You're trying to get through to an audience that wouldn't necessarily listen to a countryside-based podcast?
I think so. I think countryside people do find it useful, but I think we need to make a conscious effort that anyone can listen and understand and be accepted within that. Like, there isn't such a thing as a stupid question. If you don't know what a driven day is, or all the sorts of things that we've discussed, hopefully we can explain that and help you better understand. Like, from the outside looking in, driven days can just be like a jolly boys club, and sort of just a bunch of posh old men shooting pheasants out the sky. And that's probably, there probably is quite a few posh old men that like shooting pheasants out of the sky listening to this podcast. But the idea is that you need to understand what people need to understand what that is. It's shooting. The modern face of shooting isn't like that. I went into shooting, first of all, with the preconceived idea that someone was just going to shoot a rabbit for a laugh. That is it. I don't know what's going on here. Didn't get that much detail. Is someone just going to shoot a rabbit because they like shooting something?
This is fascinating, and but tied in with what you were saying earlier on about clothing and stuff. It's really interesting, and it because you've been through that journey recently. There's so much to learn from people that haven't been through it recently.
Precisely.
And so go on, give us all the odd things that you think straight off, like in your recent experience. You think, by the way, why on earth are we doing it that way?
So I went out with Richard Negus to Essex County Mink Hounds.
Yeah, he wrote an article on Scribehan about this, which was epic.
Yeah,
but it's so divisive if you're coming at it from the wrong angle. But fascinating.
I went in with an open mind. Right?
Brilliant.
But
which by the way, is not most people. But yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like when you go in with an open mind, that doesn't mean that at the end of it you have to agree with them. It starts off where they're having a proper jolly up. They're eating loads of food, having a picnic. That's what they're doing. Right, very much a social event. So it's a bit like a jolly boys club, right? That's how it starts. That's fine. And then they're wearing hats. There's like all this pageantry to it. There's like the red vest. There's a horn. So it all gets like a little bit absurd. They're wearing. It looks a bit like Clockwork Orange or something.
I think they all got bowler hats on. Yeah.
I mean, from a person from the countryside, it might not seem like much, but when you're a person from a town, it's like what's going on here? This is like just a bizarre thing that's happening in front of me. I was kind of shocked not shock's the wrong word, but it's just so bizarre that this was happening. And also about 20 minutes from my house, I did not know that this was happening either. So they get in the water. So the legalities of it are you're only allowed one hound and a dog. And once the dog or hound signals for the mink, then the mink has to be shot. So the hounds don't touch it. That's how that goes. So the hound signals where it is, they shoot it. But they get in, and bear in mind, this isn't like a big river. This is what you'd call a stream, really. There's fish in there. There's all sorts of bird life in there. There's coots. There's all these things. So we're walking along. We find a little patch, and Richard pulls out. Well, they put their hand into the place where the mink was. Richard pulls out all these coot chicks that the mink has taken and put into it. And they say they don't eat them. Like they might eat them, but usually they just take the coot chicks, just store them, put them in there. And then they'll go off and find something else. That's like their fridge.
Brutal, isn't it?
And you think, okay, that's pretty bad. The mink is causing some serious damage. And then they move up. They found a mink, shot one, and they must have travelled 50 yards through some really thick, cold water. So at some points they're swimming, shivering, and then they move up another 50 yards. They shot one, and then they go up a bit further. They find another one, shoot a second one. So they've covered like 200 yards. They've shot 2 mink in 200 yards.
Crikey.
And these mink are taking coot chicks. They're taking crayfish. I mean, they're non-native crayfish, but they're still taking crayfish. They're eating the fish. There's 2 in like 200 yards. So this is only a short little stream. This isn't like a main river. So God knows how many there are on like a big river. How could you possibly say these people aren't doing positive good?
Yeah.
Like they are destroying something that is a pest that I could clearly see was making damage to the environment, and I couldn't forget the pageantry of it. They're literally doing practical conservation work on the banks of the river. Let them have a jolly up and wear a red coat.
It's the classic predator control argument, isn't it? Apex predators in their little ecosystem, because of the way that man has, especially in the UK, had an impact.
Yeah.
We're here to stay. We've already buggered it up. We need to now manage it. And people just don't know about this one. The fox is just so this is kind of like the version of this, almost like the river fox, almost, isn't it?
Yeah. I feel, I don't know. I didn't understand the Countryside. I think if you saw them, they got SABs after them. So I went this year and took some photos, and then the one after, they got SABs come after them, and at one point the SABs took the dog, which was,
oh my God,
yeah, it was a bit strange. Thankfully, I wasn't there because I don't really want to be on camera and caught up in that kind of thing. I already got caught up in a wild justice claim, which was not great to have my name put on.
That's one for your LinkedIn
profile. A WordPress blog. Thankfully, they took it off.
But I think, Callum, one of the, you were talking about, trying to make the countryside or what happens in the countryside somehow more accessible to people from outside it. One of the things I think is very interesting about listening to your podcast from the perspective of somebody who sort of don't know everything at all, but has a bit of an understanding about what's going on in the countryside, is you, as one listens, you do think about how things might appear to people outside of our community, or it provides a fresh perspective. We can often end up in our own little echo chamber, and having someone like you come along and give your perspective on it and how it feels or how it looks from outside, I think is a very useful thing for all of us in shooting and in farming and all those sort of things to be able to do, and get that outsider's perspective but importantly from someone who is sympathetic or at least open-minded about it. And I think it's quite a useful exercise for people to have that available to them.
Yeah, I think people don't understand it enough. So the aim of the podcast is to make sure that people do understand it, and anybody does want to come along the journey and learn about this stuff, is that they can hear our stories, hear the conservation aspect. Like, you see videos. If you go on the YouTube videos, it's just, I'm a man in a field, I've got X whatever sponsored Browning gun I've got, and today we're killing pigeons. Well, why are you killing pigeons? I know it doesn't need to be banged home, but telling a wider audience of why you're doing this. I went out, I did a deer stalking video for someone once, and I made sure to top and tail it with Richard Negus on the farm, showing what a browse line was with a hedge. All the way to the bottom, how the understory of the hedge being eaten out makes it not good for ground nesting birds. If you manage deer properly, you might get birds like nightingales come back. All this stuff that just gets skipped over in the countryside and shooting world. If there's a message you could give to the shooting world, is to share the reasons why and what it actually means to be shooting, and it's not just because you like killing stuff.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of people that do this very well, and it depends who you follow on social media, whose emails you read, which organizations you support, all that sort of stuff. There are a lot of people that do that very well, but I totally take why you say that, and that's because the
Can you give it? Is there anyone that springs to mind? Because I will follow as many as I can. Who's
well, I mean, obviously anyone from the GWCT talks about this a lot. But then I'm thinking, so we do quite a lot with Tarquin Millington Drake, who's been on the pod before, and we do the Moreland Matters events with him. We take guests up there to educate. And I think putting me on the spot's tough. I'd need to consider. But honestly, there is quite a lot who talk about it from this mindset. But the thing is, it's not the biggest thing when you're talking about excitement. So when we talk about sharing stuff, the things that you end up sharing are the sort of the major moments, and they might have stemmed from all of that, but they're the sort of so-and-so's birthday, or like that Forgotten Drive story we were talking about earlier.
Or your photo of the chap with his left and right black powder. He's going to have wanted to share that picture because that's the sort of standout moment.
are the things that probably damage the reputation of shooting.
Exactly, because
Yeah.
they make great sharing things, and everyone in the community knows why that's such a great photo and such a lovely moment. And if it's getting likes on social media, it's because people are appreciating the difficulty of both you taking the shot of the photo and the person pulling the trigger, and everyone's sort of rejoicing in that moment. But there is this underlying,
and then some anti comes in, and then someone says, "You don't understand," and then it's just us
Then it's
versus
just
them.
people
There's
shouting
no
at each other.
education. It's just a
it's
shouting
gone all
match.
wrong.
I mean,
And exactly-
just thinking about other podcast guests we've had on, I think there's people who are brilliant at this. So, for example, Hugo, the game glutton on Instagram, is showing the food aspect of it. You've had Leon on recently; he's fantastic. Louisa from BGA, those kinds of people who I'm now desperately trying to think of somebody. From the conservation side of it.
But I mean, anyone in the organisations gets this pretty right. I'm thinking Andrew Gilruth, we've had on before, does a lot of interesting stuff, but it is slightly from a political side.
Yeah, there is a weird. This is one of the things that makes our podcast quite good, is because we're not within any organisations and we've got no associations with anyone. So it's not like we're doing it because our it's not our party line. It's not the agenda, and I think it is. I mean, everyone hates anybody that's being political and preachy on social media, but there is a certain responsibility if you're going to be part of the shooting gang to make people understand a bit more.
I think you're right, and I think we debate this a little bit, and we don't we have, of course, we've got friends in all the organisations. We work closely with lots of them, but the point of this podcast was the pub chat, and we just talk what we care about. We talk about things that matter to us, and but I mean, sorry, without getting into business, but on the Guns on Peg Strategy Day recently, we had such a heated debate about how much effort we're putting into the conservation side, because it's something that matters to all of us. But then we were saying, oh, but this is impossible for us to achieve unless we have these people on side and these people doing this, that, and the other. And we were saying, but maybe it isn't. Maybe we're the ones that could lead that. And it ended up like for a big old conversation, but it comes from the right place. This is the thing, but it's not the stuff that gets, it's not media worthy. It's in your heart. And it's the reason you end up talking about other things to do with it on social media in the first place.
Yeah. So I think I get cherry picked a lot of very good shoots. So particularly from the field, I'll go to places that have driven days. The conservation work that goes on is probably twice as much effort as what goes into the shooting. So I get to see some work. There was some recently that they were doing work on the River Rib, and they spoke to the Trout Association, the River Trout Trust, or
Wild
something.
Trout Trust.
I think it was that one, and they got some funding to sort the river out, and they were gonna reflood part of the field and add more trout into there and try and preserve the habitat. I mean, the people there were doing such a good job for conservation. Not just that's the other thing, like conservation, just to cover up the damaging bits that people are doing from shooting. I mean, that's like, doing one thing and then counterbalancing it. It's like BP, polluting the environment, but then putting a bit of carbon credits here and some capture there. It's, I mean, I'd rather people do that than not do that.
But the thing is, I honestly barely think that happens in the shooting world. I think the conservation stuff that gets spoken about is just stuff that's already happening. I think if you're a big shoot and you're just in it to like lay on big days and make money out of shooting, which by the way is almost like an impossible thing to do.
Do you think those days are numbered for those big shoots?
Look, the world's going to change, but what I'm saying, just on that point there, like they're not bothered about greenwashing. They just carry on doing what they're doing. They're not going to talk about the conservation, if that's their aim. But there's so few of those people out there, because it's very hard to find yourself in shooting and to that level without having come at it from this sort of long standpoint of this deeper understanding, and you've just been in it for a long time. Yeah. Because no one would get into that type of shoot to go and just, I can make a quick buck, because it just doesn't exist.
Yeah, I don't. And there's so many better places to focus your efforts on. flogging a few.
No, it
Which
does.
it
I
doesn't-
think it does all nearly always come from a place of a real love and respect for the countryside. And I think, as you say, Chris, I think a lot of the conservation stuff that happens is incidental, and people don't think of it as something they should talk about. And then,
Yeah, but they should.
yeah,
I know the counter argument is, are you just greenwashing because you shoot this? But they should talk about the conservation, and they should talk about why they're shooting. And yeah, I think people that shoot tend to hide their profiles on Twitter with behind privacy, and then don't really talk about the conservation work or the fact that when they take a bird that they're feeding their family with something that's actually a lot better than paying £9 for a couple of chicken breasts.
yeah. Well, I think we should probably think about wrapping up. I think that's quite a good place to do so.
I do hope I haven't made it too hot topic and political for you. And
No, we had to touch upon it on the end, and I'm glad we did, because it's interesting.
Well, and I think it's a good time of year to do it as well when we reflect on the season just gone. So I hope people listening will have found it useful. But we have still got one final segment to do before we say goodbye. And that is Desert Island shooting. Chris, take it away.
So the scenario is this: the extinction level event asteroid hits tomorrow. Your affairs are in order, loved ones and enemies reconciled, dogs fed, tomatoes watered. Your last day begins how? In your own style.
so, wait, the last day is in.
Yeah,
Your
this is
last
your
day
last
ever out
day
in the
to
field.
go and photograph some field sports.
See, the question got posed as if it was a shooting date, and to be totally honest, if it was a shooting, well, I joked with you in an email. Can I do a McNab, sleep in late, catch a salmon, and then just knock it on the head? That would be great.
I mean, I can get on board with that. That's perfectly all right with me.
So I mean that would be fantastic. But actually, I think if there was one final piece of shooting that I could do, it would be the guy I photographed first, Simon Garnham. He had to shoot through the whole season. I think they shot 130 birds in the whole season. Not that's the cumulative. I think I was there on one day that was a 50 bird day, and the rest of them were very small amount of birds. Everyone from neighbouring villages all come to the shoot. They make loads of foods. All the wives, girlfriends, kids, they all come along. You've got selection of cakes. 11sies is off the hook, so good. Lunch is even better. Do like 4 or 5 drives. I take my son with me. He absolutely loves it, although I have to carry him up and down hills on my shoulders, which is really quite difficult. But I don't. If it were, maybe the helicopter. Actually, that's part of it. I quite like doing that, carrying him while he carries. He's 5 years old, so he carries 2 pheasants, the dog by my side, all family, all people that I know, or even new people that just get welcomed into it. I think it's everything positive about shooting. I think it's a great family thing. It's full of community. The people there are absolutely lovely. Simon's mum's the local vicar. It is fantastic. I would spend the day there. My son would just be shouting, enjoying the outdoors. The dog would have a good run. She'd probably pick a few up. Fantastic. That'd be it. Let the apocalypse come.
That sounds amazing.
Lovely.
So that's, yeah. I don't think has anyone ever picked a 10 bird day? Probably not.
You'd be surprised by, I mean, we have a trio of listeners who keep a spreadsheet about all these things, and we're approaching our 100th episode, and we're going to go through and kind of work out what the trends are and what the themes are.
They're going to put 10 bird day, not shooting, weirdo.
I mean, you're the first one who's not actually held a gun, that's for sure. But we get a lot of people who some people go completely insane and hire out Balmoral and invite the Queen for dinner, and others like the the small scale local stuff and being on their syndicate with all their friends and that sort of thing. So I think there's probably quite a neat divide at the two extremes of the scale. But you're not.
We've
alone.
had fishing before,
and we've had fishing. Yeah,
we've had fishing.
You never know. One day I might shoot. They do say if you hang around in a barbershop long enough, eventually you'll get a haircut. So you never know. You might see me in the line one day.
Well, I hope we do.
It's been really good to talk to you about it. And I hope we do. And thank you so much for joining us. It's been great fun.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Right, so before we go, all that remains for me to say is there is a final reminder that you can get your hands on a pair of the very exclusive Guns on Pegs podcast shooting sock garters by sending us your shooting dilemmas for us to resolve, sharing your unpopular opinions or your forgotten drives or a podcast suggestion. Just drop us an email to pod@gunsonpegs.com, and if we read it out in the next episode or any future episode, we will send you some garters. I will be back in a couple of weeks' time with Jake Avian and Sam. Chris will be back in about 4 weeks' time. But until then, thanks very much for listening, and goodbye.